Hello learners. Today we will be covering social processes and behavioral issues on MMPC 011, Block 2 Intrapersonal Processes. That comes under Unit 6 that will discuss about perception and attribution, and Unit 7 motivation. Let's see what is perception. Perception includes all those processes by which individual receives information about its environment by seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, and smelling. In simple terms, perception is understood as an art of seeing what is there is to be seen. Perception implicates the search for obtaining and processing of the information in the mind. It can also refer to as a psychological process where people obtain or take information from the environment and make sense of their worlds. So, if we see this particular picture, which is shown, it is from one person, one girl is saying it is 6, and the boy is saying, the man is saying 9. So, it is all about how they are perceiving that particular, formation. The nature of perception is a very complex cognitive process. It gives a unique interpretation of the world, which may be very much different from reality at times. There is a lot of difference between perceptual world and the real world. Many of the problems occurring in organizations are often found to be the problems of perception. Basic elements of perceptual process. The bottom-up phase concerns the ways in which we process the raw data received by our sensory apparatus. One of the key characteristics of bottom-up processing concerns the need for selectivity. We are simply not able to process all the sensory information available to us at any given time. Bottom-up processing screens or filters out redundant and less relevant information so that we can focus on what is important. The top-down phase concerns the mental processing and allow us to order, interpret, and make sense of the world around us. One of the key characteristics of top-down processing concerns our need to make sense of our environment and our search for meaning. This distinction between sensation and perception. Sensation is bottom-up approach and perception is top-down. That can be illustrated in our ability to make sense to incomplete or even incorrect sensory information. For example, the missing letter or a comma or the incorrectly spelled term does not normally interfere with the comprehension of the human reader. Let's take it with this example, which is given in the red text. It is when we read this sentence, it is we can read it as simply as this sentence as incorrect, but you will still be able, but you will be able to understand it. So there is some missing letters in between when we say this sentence. There is a missing letter in sentence. Um, you is incorrectly spelled by o. Otherwise, we always say by ou. Will is wull, which is incorrectly spelled. So, in the above, this particular example, the top-down conceptual processing ability means that we are able to fill in the gap and correct the mistakes, and thus make sense of imperfect incoming raw data. The internal factors which affect the perception are mainly learning, personality, and motivation. Learning, our past experience leads to development of perceptual expectations of perceptual sets that gives us predispositions to perceive and pay attention to some stimuli and ignore other stimuli. Whereas the personality traits also predispose us to perceive the world in a particular ways, to pay attention to some issues and events and human characteristics and not others. Whereas a motivation is that we are more likely to perceive as important and thus to respond to stimuli that we find motivating. The process of perception is either bottom-up processing or top-down processing. In the bottom-up processing, it is all relates with the sensory inputs, that is incoming raw data, selective attention, because we cannot give the attention to all the information which is coming in. We need to be very selective in that way. We have to be very, we pay attention in selection of that particular information, whether we wanted to take it further to for the perception process or not. Then it further goes to the organization, and finally to the interpretation, and the behavioral response is an output. So basically, the process of perception consists of three particular parts after getting the senses of information or the inputs. First is selection, organization, and then finally is interpretation of that organized pattern or organized information. So Max Wertheimer states two principles. First is proximity principle and similarity principle. Proximity principle states when we tend to group together, which thus appear to be belong together. So we can see in this figure that there are blue circles. So it tends to be in one particular group. We see in a way that they belong to one particular group because of the color of of those objects. Whereas the similar, if we see the proximity, principle here, it states that we classify together stimuli that resemble each other in appearance, in some respect, or the color or the shape. Whereas in the proximity, when they are grouped together in a closure look, or maybe within the same color, or they are seems to be as a one group together, and other one, if the color is same which is shown in this figure, it seems to be another group. But in this can also be in case of where we group people or group objects on the basis of the color, the objects on the color or the shape, or maybe the when they are together, when they are sitting together. So we generally say that this is a group of people who are friends, this group is different, or that group is. So we follow the proximity principle. Whereas because this is very interrelated, and maybe sometimes get confused with this while classifying the groups or the objects on the basis of the stimuli. So there is another, a perceptual set. The perceptual set is an individual predisposition of response of the events in particular manner. The perceptual set is also known as the mental state. So if we see the picture, we tend to perceive what is expected to perceive is also called perceptual expectation. This is also known as law of expectation. So here when we see vertically the figure which is can be seen as 13, but the same figure can be seen when we perceive in a horizontal manner. It is grouped with the alphabet, so it is seen as B instead of 13. But when it is grouped together, or when it is received with numbers, it is 13. When it is received with the alphabet, it is seen as B. So this is the perceiving of expecting things, or expecting to perceive on the basis of the expectations. So the perceptual set in many organizational contexts is particularly the communication problems are created by failure to appreciate the feature of perceptual process. For example, the top management of an organization may perceive that junior employees are overreacting on some tribal issues, and we dismiss their complaints lightly. So on the other hand, the junior employees may perceive that management is not, taking them seriously, and their grievances are, since their grievances are genuine, but management is not taking it very seriously. In this situation, it makes little sense to ask whose perceptions are correct. The starting point for resolving issues is such that it must lie with the recognition that different people hold different views. They have different, perceptions on different set of circumstances and different set of, situations. Cultural factors also play a very important role in determining how we interpret available information and experience. Perceptual learning and development takes place in context of socio-cultural environment. Like for example, using some gestures can be, signaled as, you know, to be as the best of the thing or maybe perfectly done. Whereas this is one of the signal which is used to be as perfect. Whereas in other cultures, for example, in Brazil, it is known to be as a rude gesture. So culture plays a very important role in the perception process because it depends on the information which is already there and the experience of the people, they have due to their culture factors. So factors which influence perceptions are basically the perceivers, targets, and the situations. The perceiver refers to the attitudes, the motives, the interests, the past experiences, and expectations, whereas the target refers to the background, the situations, the movements, the motions, the sounds, the size, the time, proximity, or the physical, attentions. The situation refers to the time, the work environment, the social environment, light or heat. That what is the atmosphere, what was the situation, what was the time of that particular, fact, when the situation or that particular object is perceived. So these are the three major things which influence the perception. So let's see in detail about the perceiver. Perceiver is the understanding of what a person interprets when looking at an object or target being perceived will be influenced by the personal traits of the individual who perceives this. For example, we presume an individual is planning to purchase a car, then it is observed that he starts noticing other brands of cars falling within this budget with more interest. Attitude is it is all about influencing a person's perception. Unsatisfied needs or motives influences an individual's perception strongly. The perceptual process refers to it is influenced by the one's interest. Newness and novelty influences perception, and expectation also influences the individual's perception. So overall, it's not only about the individual perception. It combination of attitudes or sometimes unsatisfied needs and motives, their own interest, the novelty and newness in the object or the situation, or of course the expectations, which affects the individual perception. Second is target. Target is when the perception is impacted by some motion, sound, size, and some characteristics of the target. This usually occurs because of the target is not perceived in isolation but along with its background. We tend to group close things and similar things together. What one sees and perceives will generally depend on how one separates the figure from its general background. For example, when the lecturer uses the blackboard for teaching and writing, start writing with the chalk pieces, and students are not seeing them as as a patches of white chalk, but they recognize each and every alphabet and see the words and make the patterns accordingly, organize that perception. That is one, that is the target. At times when people have the tendency of perceiving people, objects, or events that are similar to each other, and also being grouped together. Greater is the similarity, more is the probability of perceiving them as a common group. For example, in a class, if there is a group discussion or between the boys and the girls are grouped one side and boys are grouped one side. So it is a group together basis on the gender for the specific the similarity of the physique. So the greater the similarity, one can easily recognize the girls group or even we can see in the team. We can see this in the sports ground where the jerseys are group. The players wear the same jersey color of one particular team, so that we can be able to recognize on them while watching or even on TV or maybe on the field when we are watching live. So on the color of their jersey, we can be able to recognize the team as well. The situation is the context in which we perceive events or objects. These are the elements of our surroundings, the environment, which influence our own perception. For example, if a managing director of a company calls for a meeting with his general managers and that day the junior managers makes a small mistake, the general manager is more likely to register and notice that, which otherwise on any other normal day would have been overlooked. So situation plays a very important role when we are perceiving, when the perception is there. So it is seen in our general, context also that situations play a very important role while perceiving any events happening around or maybe any objects which is very important to us. There are certain forms of perceptual organization. First is figure ground principle, perceptual grouping, perceptual consistency, perceptual context, or perceptual difference. Figure ground principle. Figure ground principle is all about perceiving the object which is separate from its background. The figure is always perceived to be contrast in background, hence will be noticed. Of course, the manner in which figure is perceived will depend on background. For example, if one were to see and have a look on the triangles given below, all the triangles are blue, but when we perceive the object, the immediately attention goes to the black, triangle, which is noticed, which is different from the background, which is separated from the background because of the color. So we notice the dark triangle in the center more prominently than the other triangles. This is because of the triangle, not only the color, but it is known to be the dissimilarity and its position of a center of the diagram. So very often a perception of particular object or maybe any person is also shaped depending upon positioning of that object. Perceptual grouping. This fundamental principle of perceptual grouping refers to tendency to group several stimuli into a recognizable pattern. This grouping is usually done on the basis of continuity, closure, proximity, and similarity. The social perception, the concept of social perception has relevance to organizational behavior. Because here's the object being perceived in the environment is another person. Even though an understanding of perception of situations, events, and objects are important, it is a knowledge of individual and differences in the perception of other people which plays a very important role of employee behavior at the workplace. So the social perception is not only concerned with knowing one individual but perceiving the other individuals also. So then let's see what is perceptual constancy. Perceptual constancy can be said to be a sophisticated form of perceptual organization in form of how we can be able to change, how we can be able to arrange, and the patterned and highly complex the objects or the things. So constancy is highly appreciated in changing and complex world. It works on the principle of learning that it emanates from pattern of cues. According to this principle, irrespective of information received by the senses, the size, shape, color, brightness, location of an object remain fairly constant. The pattern of cues are often learned by the individuals. This learning takes place even though each situation is different and there are interactions between inborn and learned tendencies and within the entire perceptual process. It is this constancy which helps people to make sense and order out the chaotic world we live in. For example, with the sudden exit of a financial executive of you know of a firm, and a chartered accountant is hired, and within a very short span of time, he is able to put the financial statements in the desired sequence. It is due to the constancy that the chartered accountant is able to go ahead with their task because of his expertise, because of his experience, he can be able to relate with a highly to simplify the complex structure or complex data and be able to organize the pattern or the sequence in a in a organized manner, so that one can be be able to locate any particular statement or particular file on easily out of that. It helps, it makes sense to other people also, not only to the people who belong to the financial background. So perceptual context is the highest form of perceptual organization. It is a context which gives meaning and value to simple stimuli, objects, events, situations, and other individuals in the environment. For example, just look at the doodles in this figure. Here, a lot of doodles are there. Is one able to understand the meaning of these doodles? Obviously not. So, but if these doodles were given some, some meaning out of that, or maybe some written or verbal context out of that, it would have indicated some understanding or meaning to a person. So, for example, if you see the doodle or the sign which is in orange, it is given, with a round shaped arrow. If the verbal context or the written context is given back to work, or maybe back to basics, so it gives a meaning out of that. Well, we can see one doodle which is there is small rainy lines are there, so it may give a written context of showing the rain. So certain symbols or the certain the signs are given but unless there is no context, it doesn't create any meaning. So this context is very important to give the value to that stimuli, to that particular signals, to that particular doodles. So factors how a person perceives another. This is very important, not only at the workplace but also in a general manner. The characteristics or attributes of person being perceived, characteristics of perceiver, situation or context within which the perception takes place. So these are the three things which we can consider that how the one person perceives another person. First is characteristics or attributes of the person being perceived. For example, one gets influenced by the status of a person perceived. To simplify the viewer's perceptual activity, the person being perceived is usually put into two categories. One is status and one is role. So if we get into social perception with the influence that maybe through by the status or by the role of that person, this physical attribute of a person perceived also affect and influence the social perception process. For example, a marketing manager with a high self-esteem sees as an attractive and pleasant regional manager who is relocated in head office. The marketing manager is likely to perceive the regional manager in a favorable and positive frame of mind. But if the marketing manager was a person with average or low self-esteem, while the regional manager is confident, outspoken, and aggressive, he may be perceived it as a negative, unfavorable form, unfavorable manner, unfavorable attribute of that particular person. So these attributes plays a very significant role in social perception, and very often we have the tendency to perceive others through the filters of our own image of ourselves. For example, if I'm not very confident, so probably I may see people who are not, also not very confident, or maybe the person who is very confident, we say that he or she is extricating their, or maybe showing off their, the their education or their own, the public speaking skills and all. So this is how we perceive, which relates, which we filter by image of ourselves on that. Then is characteristics of the perceiver. The profile of perceiver can also be as follows: if a person knows himself, it will be easier to see others accurately. One's own characteristics affect the traits one is likely to see in others. People who accept themselves are more likely to see the positive aspects of other person. And perceiving others accurately is not a single skill. So one person cannot. It is well known that one person cannot, perceive other person accurately, or on a once if they like something, so they affect the traits is likely to be seen other person also. So this is about the characteristic of perceiver. Second factor is situation or the context within which the perception takes place. The setting or the situation or environment also influences one's perception about others. The situation may be particularly significant, especially while understanding first impressions or primary effects. For example, when you happen to meet somebody for the first time in a five-star hotel accompanied by a personality whom you admire and respect, in such a situation is likely to have a very positive influence on your assessment of due acquaintance. But if he is someone whom you dislike intensely, you are likely to form a negative first impression. So this is, this perception happened to be in, based on the context, based on the person that you like it or not like it, with the context, of that. This influence plays a very important, that situation in which this positive or negative influence happen plays a very important role in perceiving. So when we see there are, since it is a perception, so there are some problems also happen in social perception. It can be halo effect, it can be stereotyping, it can be projection and expectancy. Let's see what is halo effect first. Halo effect is a cognitive bias where our overall impression of a person or a company or a product or brand influences how we perceive their specific traits or characteristics. essentially, if we see something or someone is good in one area, we tend to assume that they are good in other areas also, even without evidence. So, halo effect is overall impression. When we see good things, so we in one area we always assume that the other things are also good, irrespective of knowing the truth. So, this is halo effect. Stereotyping refers to the act of forming fixed, oversimplified, and generalized beliefs or assumptions about the group of people, typically based on characteristics such as race, gender, age, profession, nationality, or other attributes. These assumptions often ignores individual differences and can lead to biased behavior. It also leads to the discrimination and misunderstanding among people. So sometimes we fix our mindset, we fix on something that that person, for example, a person attitude is he's always in anger mode. So probably there may be some situations when you saw that person in some anger mode. So we always stereotype some people that they are they are always in anger mode, or they are not satisfied with the work of their employees. So that is because of the profession, because they are on a higher position and you are reporting to them. So probably there were some you know um, you know um, attitudes which happen to be as they are shouting, or they are asking for the reporting, and that was not done. So you saw them a couple of times in an angry mode. We always make it and refer to that person as if a person is in an anger mode always. Sometimes we stereotypes on a base of gender, where females are known to be as very soft and very emotional, whereas a male needs to known to be as very hard by their emotions, but which is not true. But the stereotyping, or maybe the work, whatever they are doing, sometimes it is also stereotyped that girls are known to be only you know you know good in managing the things or operations part, where when it comes to the manufacturing or shop floor activities, the males are more preferred. This happens to be at the organizational context. Projection is another problem, which is a psychological defense mechanism where individuals attributes their own thoughts, feelings, or undesirable traits to someone else, often unconsciously. It allows a person to avoid acknowledging uncomfortable aspects of themselves by seeing these traits in others instead. Expectancy refers to an individual's belief or anticipation about the likelihood of specific event or outcome occurring. In psychology, education, and workplace dynamics, expectancy plays a very important role in shaping motivation, shaping their behavior, and the performance of the employees. So, law of expectancy says when the individual belief or anticipation for that particular likelihood is high, they are more motivated, or the outcome has will be very on a very higher side. So it refers to individual belief, individual, and for the for example, the highly motivated or highly learned people are more productive. So the person who is highly motivated, or you know, it is expected them to be to to work in a very aggressive manner, very productive manner. The performance is expected to be on a higher side. Then the other term is impression management. Impression management refers to as self-presentation. It may be defined as an attempt by an individual to manipulate and control the impression of others form about them. the person. In a similar way, impression management can said to be a process by which people attempt to manage or control the perception formed by others. People have tendency to present themselves in such a way that they seek to impress others in social desirable manner. Impression management plays a very important role in understanding person's perception, what they think about that particular context, or what they, the way they behave, the way they, present themselves. So it largely depends on how they perceive the things. So impression management is not only a self-presentation, but it also attempt of an individual to to control, to the process, to manage and control the perceptions formed by others. The impression management is, it's all about impression motivation and impression construction. Motivation is the degree to which an individual actively manage the impression that he or she makes. Whereas the impression construction is how an individual has consciously chosen an image to convey, and also how he goes about doing that. So sometimes the impression construction as a word used as manipulating the impression that others form about them, and whereas the impression motivation is, to what extent a person manage that impression, to maintain in that particular situation, or to maintain that particular context out of it. So there are certain impression management strategies based on the, the motivation as well as the impression construction. So the certain strategies when an employee tries to minimize his responsibility for an unfavorable event, or say wants to be out of trouble, he or may use as a demotion privative strategy. On the other hand, when an employee wants to maximize responsibility for a favorable outcome, or wants to portray a better image of himself or herself, and then he or she may use a promotion enhancing strategies. So there are certain demotion prevention strategies that may take form of, uh, you know, um, form of justification of action, or forwarding an apology and disassociation. Justification of action is if it not completed the work, the employee may try to justify himself by saying that he's not keeping well. Or forwarding an apology is when an employee apologizes on the boss for some unfavorable happening and tries to impress upon his boss, and he is extremely sorry for that, and promises to see that it does not occur. And there is another, prevention strategy on impression management is when a person is disassociate. When for example, the employee is indirectly associated with something that went wrong, but he'll try to convey the impression that he's not the only distantly, he's was only, distantly associated with that particular situation, and he was overpowered by others, or not, or maybe he can say that he's not directly associated with that particular situation. So some of the promotion enhancement strategies can take form in entitlement, enhancement, obstacle disclosures, and associations. So entitlement, when an employee feels that he is not given credit for the work, but he will communicate either formally or informally his feelings to the people concerned. Enhancement is when the employee may not receive credit but feels that it deserves more. There he highlights how his efforts and the future can result to enhanced profits. Obstacle disclosures refers to when an employee is trying to create the perception, and since its achievements have been on account of big obstacles. Whereas association is when an employee tries to seen with the right people at the right time to create the impression, and he will well connected and associated with successful people. These all strategies are adopted to build impressions and perceptions. The employees have to take the deliberate attempts to manipulate while evaluating people. Second is attribution. Attribution is again a process by which we make sense of our environment through our perceptions of causality. And attribution is a belief that about the cause or causes of an event or an action. Fritz Heiser and Harlan Kelly developed attribution theory during 1950s and 1960s. They stated that our surroundings of our social world is based on our continual attempt by causal analysis. It is based on how we interpret our experiences. What is it? Why the person is so successful? Why did the project fail? If we understand the causes of success or failure and conflict, we may be able to adjust the behavior and other factors accordingly. So attribution is simply the process of attaching or attributing cause or reasons of the actions and events we see. Causality is usually described in terms of internal causality and external causality. In recent years, attribution theories have been playing an increasingly important role in work motivation. Performance appraisal and leadership are also recognized to influence the perceptions. There are certain errors which happens in perception, that is not collecting the data or proper information about the other people, or based on our judgments or information that is not even sometimes relevant, or maybe it is insignificant. Seeing what we expect to see and we want to see is not investigating further. We only see whatever we expect to see or we wanted to see further. Allowing in early information about some to affect our judgment despite later and contradictory information, accepting stereotypes uncritically, allowing our own characteristics to affect and what we see in others and how we judge them. Then is attempting to decode non-verbal behavior outside of the context, and basing of attributions on flimsy and potentially irrelevant evidence. Now it's very important, since we know the errors, we know the flaws in that. So, but how to clear these errors? In that case, taking more time and avoiding instant or snap judgments about others, maybe collecting the information, correct information and conscious information about other people, developing self-awareness and understanding how the personal bias or preference affect our perceptions and judgments of other people, and checking our attributions, particularly the links we make between aspects of personality and appearance on the hand and behavior on the other hand. So, while clearing the errors, we need to, find out not only about the self-awareness and understanding of personal bias, but also avoid the stereotypes and the early informations, because that happens to be very important to clear the errors, because early information can be sometimes biased, can be incorrect, can be time a limited time. So this has to be a combination of the activities which clear these errors. Now, after clearing the errors, it is equally important how to enhance the perceptual skills. Knowing and perceiving one's accurately is very important. Being empathetic, that is to see the person, to see a situation if it is experienced by others. Having a positive attitude, which helps in reduction of perceptual distortions. Enhancing one's self-concept, which helps in perceiving more accurately. Making a conscious effort, or maybe enhancing one's self-concept, which helps in perceiving more accurately, making conscious effort to avoid the possible common bias in perception, communicating with employees to erase incorrect perception which is formed due to misinformation or early information or biased information, and in avoiding attributions. So perceptual skills, perceptual abilities are that allow to interpret and respond to sensory information about the from the environment. We, when the seeing in the figure, it is seen that the vision is a sense organ, and the bird is the brain gets a signal after seeing through our eyes on the vision senses, and we can be able to identify that particular bird or identify that particular situation in which the bird is, whether it is in an open environment or in a cage. So this is how the perceptual skills happens on a very fraction of seconds sometimes. Sometimes we do it on a conscious effort, depend on the situation, depend on the object and our own skills also. Now, motivation is very important, but who is responsible for motivation? Either is it individual or management? The answer of these questions are not simple. While some see motivation as combined effort, it is not only through individual, but also not through only from management sides. So basically, literally, when we talk about the motivation, it is an inducement to act or move. In a workplace settings, it is mean to be subordinate act as a desired manner. So this desired, sense or desired feeling or desired way of implies the interest of an organization as well as the employee. Not only when these desired, working or desired manner is aligned with the objectives of individual as well as the organizational objective, and then only one can be able to fulfill the task in a proper manner. It implies not only to subordinate should act in a disciplined manner, but it is equally important that he should act in a efficient and productive manner to align with the organizational and personal objective. So here, when we say who is responsible for motivation, so it's not about only the individual is motivated. Along with that, the organization needs to be motivated and make an effort to make their employees or motivated to achieve the objectives of an organization. So history of motivation is happened to be started in 19th century. However, with development of learning of theories of learning, it came, but it occupies the central position. And the application of psychology in education and industry realize that motivation is a process and it is highly important in achieving the excellence. In 1953, Maitland identified achievement of motive and developed a general theory of motivation and method of measuring the same. So let's see what are the few theories of motivation. First is Maslow's need hierarchy theory. Maslow's need hierarchy theory came into in 1940 by Abraham Maslow, where it was in late 1960s. The concept of motivation was very clear. It contains 5 levels, and the emphasis shifted from study of motivational notions in such field, in different phases. But before that, Abraham Maslow says, about this concept of motivation, that there are 5 levels in physiological needs: safety needs, security needs, esteem needs, and self-actualization. So he mentioned that, the one can be able to able to motivated for safety need only when the physiological needs are fulfilled, and one can be motivated to security needs when these two needs are fulfilled. So this way it is a pyramid shape given by Abraham Maslow on the 5 different levels. Wherein late 1960s, after that, it is on about job enrichment, how to the concept of motivation move from all these basic needs to the needs which emphasize more at the workplace, the quality of work life, the organizational culture, climate, what is the meaning of work, job designing, job redesigning, allocation of work profiles, and from a very broader way of an emphasis was more on our organizational culture. So this is a basic, this is a history of motivation which happened from 1940s, and later on it moves to the from basic needs to the advanced needs in terms of organizational context. So broadly, the motivation is differentiated into ways, that is intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. The intrinsic motivation relates to the job. When one is doing and they are doing a job well, and they have a sense of satisfaction on their own. That is intrinsic motivation, which satisfies the inner self of an individual, of an employee. Whereas the extrinsic motivation relates with the task, relates with the external factors, relates with the environment sometimes. It relates with the financial incentives of doing a job well, is giving higher production, or may motivate the employees. Other motivator factors, external motivators, are recognitions, rewards, you know, recognition from the supervisors, on a good performance by the company, form of public citations, admiration of our fellow workers, improved working conditions, and other facilities. It is seen that even tap on a back from a manager to a subordinate or from a junior employee, it also creates a sense of motivation among the employees, and it is an extrinsic motivation which comes from the person or comes from a situation, whereas the intrinsic motivation is an inner feeling of doing that work which satisfies them. So there are other term which is very closely related with motivation is moral. Moral, these two expressions are not synonymous or interchangeable, but the fact remains the motivated group of workers generally has high degree of moral. So moral is composite attitude of various individuals employed by the company. It is generated by the group and may be considered as a byproduct of the group. It is not an average of individual attitude. It can be seen as attitude of satisfaction with a desire to continue in and willingness to strive for that particular goals of the group or an organization. The morale is also known to be as the possession of feeling of being accepted by and the belongingness to a group or employees through adherence to the common goal and confidence in the desirability of that goal. So basically, morale is a group concept, whereas the motivation is largely an individual concept. So morale is all about the group of individuals at the workplace when it is said to be as the organization culture. The morale of the employees are very high. Because overall the environment was very good and overall the employees are very satisfied with the organizational climate. So there are certain characteristics of motivation where the one is individuals differ in their motivation. There is no single economic drive which determines behavior. Everybody have their own goals on an individual level that may be differ. So do their motivations also. So motivation is highly situational. It depends on a person may work very well in one organization and maybe not able to perform, on the same manner in the other organization or other job or maybe on the other job role. The performance may vary with working condition as well as the type of supervision we have, the type of sometimes it is said that managers are or plays a very important role when it comes to a motivation of subordinate to the subordinates. So motivation changes as from time to time also. It depends on their needs. It depends on the situations and around them. Sometimes it relates with a not every time at the organization, but it is also about the personal issues or personal problems, or maybe the personal and environment change and an individual also change their goals and their desires. Uh, Therefore, there after the motivation also the factors of motivation also changes. So motivation is expressed differently by different people. Need and ways are translated into action, and they may vary considerably from one individual to another. Different people have different needs, different desires, and they react differently in different situations. So, motivation is expressed differently by different people. Motivation is complex. It is difficult sometimes to explain what motivates them, even sometimes to predict the behavior of a person. It may produce sometimes a person if he is in a happy mood, it is seen that a person behaves in a very positive manner, and that day productivity rises. And for example, if a person is not in a good mood, or maybe if there is any problems or issues at the personal level, so it is seen that during those days a person is not feeling well at organization also, and they may not be able to perform in the same manner as they were performing before. So it sometimes it's very complex. Sometimes it's very difficult to predict the behavior of an employees. So overall, when we see the characteristic of a motivation at the workplace, it largely depends on not only one individual. It is a combined effort of the individuals. It is combined effort of the organization and the employees both. When the objectives of the individual and employees are combined, and when they are aligned together, then only one can have the better workplace, one can have the better employees. Better employees means here are the motivated employees which are aligned with the organizational objectives, and there is depends on the situations, depends on the individuals. So when we talk about the intrinsic motivation at the workplace, here the intrinsic motivation is when employees feel like working. For example, there is an employee who feels like going to the office. It shows the kind of culture or kind of environment. One can perceive that the office environment must be very good, or they may be giving some extra perks or whatever be the thing. So a person is feeling like doing that on the basis of the job role given to them. But if a person is given, motivated going to a job because their salary has been increased and the the position has increased and all, so that is an intrinsic motivation what they get it. But either intrinsic or extrinsic motivation, the motivated employees is should be aligned with the individual objectives and organizational objectives overall. Then only they can be able to be known to be as a productive workforce, because only sometimes individual needs or the individual motivation is not enough. That can be changed by the situation or by the time, but it has to be aligned with the organizational objective for the further growth and upliftment of not only the employees but also the the productivity of an organization. So when we get back to the motivation, so here it is all about the interest of an organization. We also learned about the perceptual skills before that, which is the abilities that allow people to interpret and respond to sensory information from the environment through any of the senses, that is hearing, seeing, tasting, movement, motions, and here tasting, smelling. So here one of the example of vision is given, where how we can interpret and we can allow to interpret the things. The attribution, we have done the impression management strategies mainly on justification of action, forwarding an apology, and disassociation, because here the impression management relates with directly with the process by which people attempt to manage and control the perception formed by others. So it is very important at the workplace, because here they are not only self-presenting themselves but also defining their attempt to the to control that impressions, you know to form it on the other people at the workplace. So there are certain strategies which we discussed. We also discussed on all right. We also discussed on social perception, on the four problems, on halotype, stereotyping, protection, and expectancy, situation or context within which perception takes place, characteristics of person being perceived, and the attributes of a person being perceived. Then we also discuss on the perceptual context, perceptual constancy, grouping, social and figure ground principle, which are the forms of perceptual organization. Because organization is a step of forming the perceptual process. The second step, the first step is all about the selection of an attention, where we are paying attention, we are selecting what information, what stimuli, what is coming to us. We select that pattern, we recognize that pattern, then we organize, and finally we interpret. So finally we have done on perception and attribution overall, and I hope I can be able to make you clear on all these topics. So overall we summarize on concept of perception, nature of perception, factors which influence a perception, forms of perceptual organization, problems in social perception, attribution, impression management, motivation, and finally the motivation and model. So thank you so much for all this today, and I'll see you in the next session. Thank you so much.